Greetings, salutations. This is Pro Golf Critic here, co-host of the Golf Lovers United podcast. Going solo today. I've got a couple topics that I've been wanting to talk about in a little bit more detail, and I feel like this is one I kind of had to do on my own. Talking about this is really for me personally talking about my love of LIV Golf and because I've gotten so many questions about it over the course of the last 3 years specifically. And also my strong dislike, let's not call it hate, it's strong dislike of the PGA Tour. And this is coming from someone that is look, I've been playing golf for about 30 plus years. Started playing it when I was, in high school. And I've been as big of a fan of the PGA Tour as anyone over the course of time. Huge Tiger Woods fan growing up. I mean, there were really three players that really sort of spiked my particular interest in pro golf. It was really Tiger, Phil Mickelson, of course, and Greg Norman. Those are sort of the three players that were prominent around the time that I started, or really just sort of gravitated to them for a variety of reasons. Now, over the course of time, as I've sort of matured and gotten older, learned more about some of the inner workings of the PJ Tour that I've learned from a variety of sources and people, and also I've read and sort of written voraciously about this over the last 3 years, ever since the divide in golf came about. And I've definitely gotten a reputation, particularly on social media, as someone that criticizes the PGA Tour. I mean, obviously, when your name is Pro Golf Critic, I mean, you're going to be critical of pro golf. It's kind of part of the deal. And the PGA Tour has been the American golf establishment for a long time. I mean, we're going on almost 60 years. I mean, really longer than that for some of these other tournaments they became part of the PGA Tour eventually, in the 60s. So there's been a lot that's sort of happened over the last few years, and I kind of had one of those moments this past weekend. So Golf Lover and I, we kind of had our own travels the last couple weeks, and it's part of the reason why I'm kind of doing this solo podcast. He's still traveling. I just got back, and I found I found myself on the golf course recently, and I was actually talking to a U.S. congressman. I mean, it sounds crazy, but it's true. And I found myself lobbying for the virtues of LIV Golf, basically the entire round. And it was mostly because he had a lot of questions, and I have a lot of information. Obviously, I love to talk about this stuff. It's one of the things that I've gotten a reputation for, having really strong opinions and sort of having all the information sort of back up those opinions and being very, very consistent with those opinions. So I want to kind of get into how this all started. I'm going to try to keep this brief, try to keep it hopefully under 30 minutes, but we'll see. I tend to ramble on these things, so can't make any promises. So I got a reputation, really all started around the same time of year, 3 years ago. I wrote an article. I wrote it on Medium. I will link that below on YouTube, just in case you haven't read it yet. It was called "The Truth About LIV Golf, the PGA Tour, and the Media." Wrote this in October 2022, and it was really just sort of consolidation of all of my musings of the prior probably 6 months. I mean, ever since LIV Golf came about, I just, when LIV started, there wasn't really a ton of information about some of the going ons behind the scenes of the PJ Tour, the things that the PJ Tour was trying to do to stop LIV from coming about. And those are things that I kind of learned later on, except the piece that I wrote in 2022 was really, really detailed. And I'm not going to go through the details of the article. Again, I'm going to link that up below. However, there were always things going on between LIV and the PGA Tour that never sat right with me. The PGA Tour, for as much as I've loved it for a long time, I definitely felt the last really, I don't know, 5 to 10 years as sort of Tiger was not really playing a ton, and obviously Phil Mickelson was getting older and Greg Norman retired. Those are again were some of my favorite golfers. I definitely felt like the product that the PGA Tour was putting out was a little stale, it was a little stagnant. And it was definitely time for something new. I didn't know exactly what that was. However, when I heard about the PGL Premier Golf League, which is an idea that's been floating around a little over 10 years. Andy Gardner, he's a lawyer that's based in the UK. It's kind of his brainchild, where he did a ton of research on, if you were to start a professional golf league now and forget about all these sort of legacy sort of individual events, what would be the format that might bring more casual fans in and make the sport bigger and better and like as big as it could be? He really highlighted the Ryder Cup and sort of team golf as like one of the things that he really felt like the sport should sort of focus in on and sort of hone in on, that really team concept, to really galvanize fans of other professional sports and make professional golf more attractive to them. I thought that was a really, really interesting and important thing. I heard him talk about it in detail on the No Laying Up podcast that I used to listen to, and I I don't listen to it nearly the way that I used to for a variety of reasons, mostly because they're part of the media machine that's been extremely negative about LIV Golf. So basically, that was an idea that was really exciting to me, and I kind of followed it, and it was very clear that the PGA Tour was doing everything that they could to stop it. And I always wondered why, when the PGL specifically wanted to work with the PGA Tour, LIV wanted to work with the PGA Tour as well in order to just sort of really be additive to the space. But it was very clear that the PGA Tour was not interested. They wanted to basically be the monopoly that sort of ran professional golf tours throughout the world. They had plenty of influence on a variety of things, whether it be the OWGR official world golf rankings or the majors. They're all sort of part of the same cabal. And you look at all the people that were on the board of the PGA Tour at the time, a lot of those folks were members of these various organizations. And the whole thing was just very, very clear to me that they had this control over the professional golf world, and they did not want to cede any of it. So that much was pretty clear to me. And I felt like as time went on and more information started to come out in the litigation and stuff like that, things that the media wasn't really covering the way I felt like they should. It was it was very clear to me, like the sort of anti-competitive stuff that the PGA Tour was doing, the legacy and sort of culture that they had built that was there solely to protect the interests of the PGA Tour, in spite of fans maybe wanting more than that. So I want to kind of take you through some of the things that I've seen over the course of the last 3 to 4 years. And it really all starts with when LIV, actually, it starts even prior to LIV coming on the scene. Phil Mickelson, he did a really great job via Twitter, kind of recapping some of the course of events that happened. And I'm actually going to show you that article here. So this is actually a article that summarizes, this is from Golf Monthly. I'll link this one below as well, so you have access to it. So we kind of recap some of the things that were going on behind the scenes with the PGA Tour board. And, the players wanted more control. They wanted more sort of financial interest. They wanted to have things that they had equity in and all that stuff that the PGA Tour didn't want. So there were a couple really interesting things that sort of came from his message. So this is actually a tweet this was later in 2023 when he actually posted this. Except I think it sets the table and sort of shows you some of the timetable of when some of the stuff happens. So for people on the podcast, I'll read the highlighted quote here. So Phil was basically talking about In 2021, he had coordinated with a few of the stars of the PGA Tour. There was an opportunity for the players who had found investment. It was actually Silver Lake Capital, is based here in the Bay Area, and basically Endeavor, which is kind of like the parent company of UFC and a few other really high level entertainment companies. They were going to run a series of 8 elevated events, and the players and Silver Lake Capital would own the new elevated events in a 50-50 in a separate entity, which is basically like exactly the reason why LIV came about. The players that helped start LIV, including Phil and Bryson and a bunch of others, DJ, obviously, Brooks, etc. They really wanted to, when their careers were over, they wanted to have more financial interest in the things that they felt like they were giving their blood, sweat, and tears to, which totally makes sense to me. If you're contributing so much to the game, after you're done playing, the game really should be given back to you 100%. And that event eventually panned out with PGA Tour Enterprises investing, SG putting 1.5 billion in PGA Tour Enterprises, which is now the for-profit arm of the PGA Tour. And sort of the end results of that is a lot of the players, past and present, are going to have equity in this program. I'm going to save that for another time, though. This is more just about kind of recapping some of the history. So October 30th, this is from Phil's tweet. October 30th, 2821, Ed Hurley, who was the PGA Tour's policy board chairman, said that the PGA Tour would take a hostile view to this new entity created by the players in Silver Lake Capital. They would take a hostile view to it and shut this down if it's not completely 100% owned by the PGA Tour. Then in February of 2022, Silver Lake Capital went back to Jay Monahan, the PGA Tour commissioner at the time, and said the, quote, Saudi League, we'll get back to that, was going to happen, and these new elevated events could prevent players from leaving. Now, again, this was one of those situations where the PGA Tour had ample opportunity to prevent LIV Golf from getting off the ground. And the way they needed to do that was by working with the players in a fair and sort of equitable way to give them something that they want that could be theirs. PGA Tour obviously wasn't going to do that. They resisted. The players decided to go off and do their own thing, do LIV Golf. Here we are. So finishing the tweet. So Silver Lake Capital basically said that the Saudi League was going to happen, and these new elevated event series could prevent players from leaving. Jay Monahan said at that time, quote, and I quote, "The players won't go. They know what we will do to them, so we won't be doing this." That to me is the smoking gun in this entire saga from the last 3 to 4 years, where that is like a direct threat to the players and everything around them, that if you go off and do this new thing that's unauthorized, we will smear you. We will do all these other things in the media. We are going to tarnish your reputation. We're going to do all these things using all the things at their disposal to smear them, which is exactly what happened. So then Silver Lake went back to Jay Monahan in May 2022. The same conversation took place. Jay Monahan and Ed Hurley had 3 opportunities to have this elevated event series that would be fully funded and could prevent LIV Golf from getting off the ground and prevent division. But the PGA Tour's need to control everything, quote unquote, obnoxious greed, blinded their judgment. Let's get the facts straight. All those things that were in Phil's tweet are factual. Some of this is in records that have been part of litigations to this point. Some of that stuff isn't necessarily public information. However, part of the reason why I was hoping that the litigation would go forward and it didn't get settled June of 2023 was because I wanted all this stuff to come out so that the fans and everybody around professional golf could see all this, all the documentation, everything. So This particular documentation never came out, even though these emails exist. I know that they exist. This is 100% factual. So that obviously happened, this communication. And the other thing that I thought about was Jay Monahan was obviously talking about threatening the PGA Tour players. Obviously, this was kind of a pretty damning. I thought the whole threatening of the players, just basically saying, the players no one will do to them, and that to me is just like a huge indictment on just his leadership. So just to summarize, obviously there was a long background going like basically years prior to LIV Golf coming off the ground, and there was all this resistance from the PGA Tour to be malleable and to change and to allow the players more control and all that stuff, which clearly wasn't gonna happen. Jay Monahan and that whole crew sort of threatened the players, which we'll get to more of that as time goes on. And the thing that like really bothered me was this this thing from Jay Monahan when he went on CBS. This was, I believe, June 12th, 2022. This was right after LIV Golf got off the ground. A few players had gone over to play in the initial London Invitational, where a lot of the key PGA Tour players like Phil Mickelson and Dustin Johnson, Ian Poulter, Lee Westwood, etc., Sergio Garcia as well, went over to LIV Golf and basically got LIV off the ground. And at that point, it was very clear that like the PGA Tour was going to respond in a very hostile way. Jay Monahan went on with Jim Nantz on CBS to kind of go into a little bit of detail and make a statement. I don't think any of us were really expecting this. I'm just going to play it, and then we'll talk about it after.
9/11 Families United sent a letter to the representatives of Phil, Dustin, Bryson, Reed, and others, quote, expressing their outrage towards the golfers for participating in the new league and accusing them of sports washing and betraying the United States, end quote. And that's gotten a lot of steam over the last 24 hours. That story first reported again in the New York Post.
God, I forgot he said that.
How much did you talk to your players about the possible ramifications if they sign on with the new league?
Well, I talked to players. I've talked at a player meeting, and I've talked to a number of players individually for a long period of time. And I think you'd have to be living under a rock to not know that there are significant implications. And as it relates to the families of 9/11, I have two families that are close to me that lost loved ones. And so my heart goes out to them. And I would ask, any player that has left or any player that would ever consider leaving, have you ever had to apologize for being a member of the PGA Tour?
Wow. I'm sorry. That was, still to this day, 3 years later, every time I listen to that, I'm like, did the commissioner of the PGA Tour really go on CBS, which has millions of viewers every week, go on and basically call the players that went over to LIV, the ones that left the PGA Tour, he's basically equating them to terrorists. Now, like, invoking 9/11 in this is something that I know that he eventually, he kind of had to apologize for it, particularly when he was basically leading the charge of the PGA Tour negotiating with the Saudi PIF that culminated with Jay Monahan and Yasser Al-Rumayyan going on CNBC and basically saying that LIV and the PGA were going to merge. Now, that merger obviously never happened, but this is something that, like, I think when you go on TV like this, like it's something that you can't come back from. Like, I just think that you go so far over the line to completely try to smear and to demean and to ruin your players that used to like you, that like gave many, many years of service to the PGA Tour, and you basically went on national TV trying to smear them. Let's just call it what it is. He was trying to smear these players. Now, this sort of goes back to, like, there's been all these rumors about players on LIV wanting to go back to the PGA Tour. Like, even though the PGA Tour leadership has changed, they've never really apologized publicly for all the things that they did to try to smear them. So if I'm one of these guys, whether it be Phil or Bryson or Brooks or whoever, why the hell would I want to go back to an organization that smeared me in such a way? Like, we understand that the PGA Tour was quote unquote under threat, even though they were never really under threat. Yeah, they were going to lose some talent, but you could have easily worked with Phil, and you could have easily worked with Silver Lake to establish the series that would have prevented the division. You didn't do it, and this is the result. And now you felt totally cornered, and you're like, oh, we need to try to end LIV Golf. We need to try to make it dead in the water, to quote a phrase from Rory McIlroy. And that was never going to happen because, frankly, the Saudi PIF and the investors in LIV, they had too much at stake at this point. Once those checks started flying, and like they invested so much in LIV Golf, and there's been reports out there that they've invested, approximately $5 billion in LIV. This is not something that they were just going to give up on because like you were mean to them in the media. So it wasn't going to happen. I think that this whole situation is just like such an indictment of the PGA Tour and their leadership. And I think this is something that like people are just conveniently forgetting about. And to me, this is something that is frankly unforgivable to me. And it's part of the reason why even though like I tune into a few PGA Tour events here and there, the fact that this whole rift has never really been fully addressed in my mind is something that really irks me. So, and to me, as someone that's been a part of organizations where, leadership has sort of thrown some of the employees under the bus if things have gone wrong in some way, like, it's really hard for me to root for any players on the PGA Tour, particularly the ones that just like stood idly by while all this stuff happened and basically let Jay Monahan and let the leadership just totally rake them over the coals. And the fact is, and many, many players have said this since, professional golfers, particularly the top players, had never been better off after LIV Golf came about, because there was more money. There's more money to the LIV players. There's more money they're competing for in the PGA Tour. The PGA Tour has significantly less top-level players and depth that they had previously, which allows more players access to this money. All those PGA Tour players should be absolutely thrilled that LIV Golf came around. Phil and Bryson and all the others sort of coordinated this and went off and broke away. And everybody, all the professional golfers have certainly wound up really, really well in this whole thing. Really, really well off. So it doesn't stop there, though. That was one of the things that sort of happened. That was Jay Monahan going on. That was June 12th, 2022. Now, there were other things that came out in the litigation. This is actually a completely separate litigation that happened. It was actually a totally separate case, except a lot of the documents that were in this particular case became public. Shout out Desert Duffer, who is a lawyer who was able to access these publicly available documents and made them and exposed it on Twitter. Sports Illustrated validated that, collected their own documents, and all this is documented fact. These are from discovery in this litigation. This actually happened. So a week after Jay Monahan goes on CBS. He also, at the Travelers, like a week and a half later, he goes and talks to the PGA Tour players. They have a town hall meeting to sort of talk about LIV and all that stuff. So I'm going to read this for the podcast folks. So there was basically a talking points memo that Jay Monahan was going to read to all of the players at the PGA Tour, at the Travelers. And basically, he said that, the LIV Golf Series was a threat to their livelihood, to your business, and the game of golf as a whole. Obviously, that's not true. And how punishments for those who went to LIV Golf will be handled. Again, this next sentence is another smoking gun to me, which explains so much. Quote, "You should know I'm fielding calls from across our industry and beyond, our media partners, our corporate partners, our title sponsors, host organizations, politicians from both sides of the aisle. Everyone is with us," Monahan said in the meeting. "They're all raising their hands and offering to do, quote, whatever it takes to see the PGA Tour through this threat." Now, that to me is just one of the most damning things I've ever seen in documents. Like, this explains so much. It's like the leadership of the PGA Tour, they coordinated with their media partners, someone like CBS Sports, someone like all these these corporate media-driven golf publications that I've dubbed the corrupt golf media. They were all in bed with the PGA Tour. They all agreed to help the PGA Tour through this threat. Now, how do you do that? You allow Jay Monahan to come on CBS and talk about 9/11, talk about the 9/11 families, try to equate, somehow attach the odor of a terrorist act, try to attach that to these players that left to go to LIV Golf. That's one way you do it. The other ways you would do it is obviously any chance that any of these media organizations have to smear these guys, whether it be in Golf Digest, in Golf Week, shout out someone like Eamon Lynch. Golf Channel, shout out Brandel Chambly. All these people, this was a coordinated smear campaign from the beginning. And it's something that really, really drove me crazy. And like, it was so clear to me this was going on. That's what led me to write my piece about the truth about LIV Golf, the PGA Tour, and the media, because it was so clear to me that this whole campaign, this whole smear campaign that they had was coordinated. And it was something that was completely orchestrated by the PGA Tour, because they were under threat and because of the culture that they built, this culture of opposition instead of what they needed to have, a culture of collaboration that could have led to some more cool things happening with the players being able to have equity and sort of owning more events and an event series and all this other stuff that could have prevented LIV Golf from getting off the ground. Now, in the end, I'm glad that the PGA Tour wound up doing what they did, because I wanted something like LIV to come about. I wanted PGL prior to that. I wanted LIV Golf to get off the ground, because I felt like teams in golf was like such an important thing. And it's the primary reason why I love LIV Golf the way that I do, because I feel like it's this completely different way of consuming golf, consuming professional golf. They're able to LIV as a whole they're able to compete with the PGA Tour for talent. And because of that, you're raising the bar of both organizations, where, if the PGA Tour wants to keep their talent, they have to up the purses. If LIV Golf wants to get more players from the PGA Tour or from the European Tour, DP World Tour, they've got to pay to bring those players over. That's how the last 3 years has worked, because there's this ongoing division in pro golf. I still think that LIV needs to pay a little bit extra to attract more of those players from the PGA Tour and bring them over to the LIV Golf this offseason. That is still TBD. We'll see what happens with that. However, it's something that they absolutely need to do, and I think most people at LIV know that.